Hello. I haven't done one of these in a while, and I'm supposed to be doing a bunch of them for my channel. The first chapter is on cultural relativism. And I have a hard time understanding cultural relativism because there seems to be like just a gap that I'm not seeing. It's important, before we begin, to know the difference between meta-ethical and ethical claims. An ethical claim is about some sort of value, like tolerance and stuff like that. No, about what values we should have and how to go about bringing that about, or how to do with it. And meta-ethics is really more about ethics as a whole, how ethics should be done, and stuff like that. So, cultural relativism seems to notice first that there really doesn't seem to be an agreement on ethical claims, which that's not a philosophic claim right there. If you say different countries have different moral claims, it's not a philosophic statement. That's a descriptive statement, because you're not arguing for values. You're just simply stating that there's different values. So there's not really an argument there. So that seems to be the problem with the cultural relativism. It starts with the descriptive. It doesn't really start with the descriptive. That was the problem with Rachel's, and my professor pointed out, which was that Rachel's makes it sound like cultural relativists, one of their major premises is that different societies have different moral codes. Which, if that's all they have, then they're screwed. Because if all cultural relativists are starting off with is that different societies have different moralities, then they can't do anything with it. That's it. I can't see how, if it seems like that's not really their main premise, but if their main premise is simply the descriptive, different societies have different codes, then they can't go straight past ethical into meta-ethics and say, therefore, there's no objective one morality or ethical code, and what every individual society does is what's right for them. So, but there's just no, unless someone cultural relativist who see this video can explain it to me, I don't see how you can go from a descriptive claim to this big meta-ethical claim. And also someone claimed that the way out of this problem is to just see cultural relativism as one of our values, one of our beliefs. Not everyone has to follow cultural relativism. That cultural relativism is just something that we have in America. But, as I pointed out in class, you can't, and the professor pointed out really well, it's basically that can't be the case, because cultural relativism, it's not a value, it's not like an ethical claim like tolerance or kindness or generosity or virtues and stuff like that. It's a meta-ethical claim, thus it's about how ethics should be done overall. So it can't be held as in the ethical sphere, it would be a tolerance that you're really talking about. But tolerance is in the ethical sphere, not in the meta-ethical sphere. So it's meta-ethical cultural relativism, which means it sort of has to apply to everyone for it to be a meta-ethical theory, and it is meta-ethical because it does sort of say that everyone should be like this cultural relativists. But the thing is, the problem that I was pointing out in class is, of course, what if different society, it doesn't really say anything about what your ethical code should be, just that every society has their own code. So if society B, part of their code is intolerance and invasion, and society B, theirs is tolerance and not invasion, then when society A eventually invades B, what are the cultural relativists in the society B supposed to say? Don't do that? Society A will just say, well, hey, you're a cultural relativist. It's part of our culture to invade you, so we're going to invade you. Now, I can see the argument that if you are for cultural relativism, then a part of that is the ethical claim of tolerance. But then you have that problem of, well, cultural relativism says that ethical claims are all unique to the culture, so how can you make tolerance an ethical claim that everyone has based on your meta-ethical claim of cultural relativism? From cultural relativism, you can't say everyone should be tolerant. You can only say that they're relativistic towards particular cultures. Tolerant is not part of it. Tolerance is simply the American version of cultural relativism. So, because it's a mixture of our meta-ethical and ethical claims in the American sense. But I don't see why you couldn't be like a different country. You hold on to cultural relativism too, but you're an intolerant society. So you believe in every society has its own code, and it's relative to their own code, but your society has intolerance, so you're going to go with that. So that's the thing. You really have to keep meta-ethical and ethical claims different when we're talking about cultural relativism. And so that's a point to make. And also there's the problem of conformists and non-conformists. If cultural relativism is true, what do you do about non-conformists? It doesn't seem to... Non-conformists seem to be really breaking the rules of cultural relativism because they're rebelling against their society. And also, I have this crazier claim I have to make with cultural relativism, which is that if morals are just subjective and just have to do with their society, what if I make my own society within the society by taking over my state, Kansas? And now I have my own culture, so I can make whatever morality I want because I'm dictator of Kansas. And Kansas is now its own society. But if you say, no, it's still American society, then why can't you just spread that out and say, well, nation-states shouldn't really be able to make their own societies because they're really just part of the world society and world culture. So, I don't know. That's my problem with that. So this cultural relativism, I don't really buy into it. The only thing that can be salvaged from it is the idea that you might be wrong morally. But the thing is, I don't consider I think you could just scrap all of cultural relativism and replace the one good part with cultural relativism, as that is that believing that your culture might be wrong, by just going with a different moral theory, which is simply that we shouldn't base our moral codes on what the majority of society believes, but what we individually think is correct based on reason and rationality. So we shouldn't be, which I'm not saying each individual person should be able to make their own code, and if their code is killing, then we should just respect it. I mean, it's like what our society believes ultimately doesn't have anything to do with what actually is. Like, society could believe that the earth is flat. That doesn't make it flat. So society could believe some dumb ethical claim. That doesn't mean that that's true, and we should be able to criticize it, think about it, and come up with our own views. So that's what I'm trying to... So that when you're doing ethics, you should try to step outside of your society as much as possible and only look at what seems to be the case. In which case, if you do that, the only good thing about cultural relativism is becomes sort of irrelevant. So I don't really see any saving graces in cultural relativism. So one saving grace is just sort of irrelevant. The rest of it, I don't see how it could work. I don't know. Any cultural relativists, which I'm sure there's a couple on my subscription list, please tell me how cultural relativism is still a viable moral theory, why it's good, why I'm wrong, how it can be saved and salvaged. Is there any way to change it or tweak it to be salvageable? Am I missing anything about it? Just a comment down below.